Hi, Dan Thies back with the final video of Week 2 in Link Liberation 3, Building an Audience. This is the weekly action plan. In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between outcomes and methods, give you a list of actions that you need to take. There are some that are going to be time-dependent actions, things that need to be done, for example, daily or ideally daily, and time-independent actions, things that you can do, well, as time fits and don't necessarily need to be done at a particular time, and some periodic actions that you'll need to do, say, weekly, to help you just keep up. And of course, we'll have some tips for you to make the most out of it. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what you need to do and when it needs to be done. The outcome, that is, what actually has to get done. Now, the methods that you're going to use, different tools that you might use, we'll explore that more in the practice module. I'll show you what I use and how I do the work, and even some things that other people use and what other options are. But understand here, there are a zillion tools out there that you can use for all kinds of different purposes, and I can guarantee you there is not one thing that I could recommend that everyone listening to me right now would find useful. If there were, I've already talked about it. So is Klout useful for everyone to help them research? Yes. Is Twitter useful to everyone to help you build an audience? Yes. But most of the time when we talk about tools, they're only one of several different options, and that's why we'll tell you about different options that you have. So let's talk about the activities that go into this first section of Link Liberation, the things that you need to do, the core activities. The first one is gathering stories. That means titles, links, and if you have the time, information about the author and their Twitter handle and stuff like that. Sharing stories on Twitter by story tweets. That's a very important thing, right? You're going to be tweeting out titles and links and whatever else you might want to have. There will be stories that you share directly. That is, stories that you found and you share a link to directly with the audience. And then there will be stories that you found either because someone tweeted about it or stories that you found and you figured out who has tweeted it so that you can retweet them. Of course, we'll spend some time following people and, unfortunately, also unfollowing people. But understand here, these are pretty simple sets of actions. Don't try to be perfect at this because you can't. Optimizing is not perfecting, and time has a cost too. So if you find yourself spending too much time thinking about should I do this or that, flip a coin, do something, and move on. So first thing here, your daily actions. And these are time dependent. You really do want to have activity on your Twitter account every day if you can. And what you'd like to be doing is sharing links to 5 or 6 stories throughout the day each day. Could be 4 sometimes, could be 6 or 7 sometimes. You don't want it to be 100 because then you're too noisy for people to want to follow you. I highly recommend signing up for an account with Buffer. You can find that at bufferapp.com. It's free, and they also have lots of cool extras and things that can plug into it. Buffer will let you automatically space out your tweets. All you have to do is stick stuff into Buffer, and it'll tweet it out later. I also highly recommend at least taking a look at either Twiriad or Social Bro, and you can do this later on. If you just have a 9 to 5 tweet schedule on Buffer to start with, things will work out okay. But Twiriad and Social Pro will let you see what time the followers that you have are actually online. And this will change over time, so it's something where you are probably going to want to, once you have a sizable audience, get a subscription from those to get the most out of it. Early on, don't need it. So for each story that you've found that you're going to share, you want to check who tweeted it already. So go to back tweets and who tweeted me and figure out who shared the story already. Follow a few of the people who tweeted the link and pick one to retweet. Early on, you want about 50% of your tweets, your story tweets, to be just the link. So just you sharing a story directly with the audience, and about 50% of them being retweets of other people. And that's really a pretty good mix to keep up with until you sort of hit that critical mass stage, at which point you can pretty much ignore retweeting other people unless you actually found a good story from someone and you want to let people know about it. If you've taken the time to gather the author's name or their Twitter profile, then when you're tweeting out a story that's by someone that you can find on Twitter, mix in their handle when you tweet it out, so by @whoever, and follow that person if you can as well. The best time to hope for them to follow you back is when you just shared one of their stories with your audience. There are also some things that need to happen every day, but it really doesn't matter what time you do them. Like I showed you in the previous slide, you can actually use Buffer to pre-schedule tweets for months and months and months if you want to. But every day you'd like to be following 4 or 5 people a day. And now this can be done less frequently, but do it at least once a week and preferably more often because it's just easier to manage if you do it more often. So if you're going to follow 4 or 5 people a day or 20 or 25 people a week and you do it once a week, that's the way you want to handle it. You want to be following some listeners from the speakers and influencers that you follow because your audience ultimately you want to have listeners in it. So the people that you're already following, the people whose stories that you're sharing, those are people that you'd like to follow because those people are the ones that you'd also like to follow you back because they're already listening to somebody else who's talking about the same stuff. There's a concept that we use inside of Link Liberation in our Brain Trust group, and I'm pretty sure we didn't invent it, but it's called team followback. And that is people who actually are very likely to follow people back and people who expect others to follow them back when they follow them. It's just sort of a way of thinking about it, and it's also the way that bots operate. But there really are people who will follow you back when you follow them, in particular if they can see from looking at your profile and the tweets that you're sending out that you are a real person too. Every day if you can, and less often if you have to, you'd like to deal with anyone who has spoken to you with an @reply or just using @your handle. Any bots that are spamming you, just hit the block and report spam button. But the real humans deserve an answer, and this should really only take a few minutes a day at the peak when you have a huge audience. And finally, you'd like to get a direct message out to any new followers that you have on a daily basis. That doesn't mean that you need to message them back right away or even reply to people instantly. Remember, nobody expects you to be sitting on Twitter 24 hours a day. But if you answer people within a day, they're a lot more likely to view that positively and also to view you as a useful resource. On a regular basis, and I like to do it weekly, you want to keep looking for and finding new stories and sources. Stories that you can share and sources that will help you find more stories. In particular, if you can find RSS feeds from blogs, news sites, and of course using tweeted times or other things to track the links that people are sharing on Twitter, those are very useful. We'll spend some time in the practice module looking at how to set up RSS feeds and how to set up a workflow around RSS feeds. You'll also need to, on a regular basis, and I like to do this weekly, is just clean up your followers. ManageFlitter.com is a useful tool, but it's not free. And with a small number of followers and a small amount of activity, it's not all that important. People who don't follow you back in a week or two are probably people that you can safely unfollow. Speakers who you followed because you thought they were going to say useful, interesting stuff, but it turns out that all they do is talk about their dog or their baby's poop or something like that, can also be unfollowed. You don't need to unfollow people unless you actually need to clear space in your follower count, or if somebody is just a complete waste of time. And some people do have problems on Twitter with bots. That is, software machines that are designed to try to create a fake following and do whatever the heck they do. And bots that are out there that are retweeting and sharing stories and blabbing stories about a topic, they're not necessarily a problem even if they follow you back or don't. The ones that have an egg as their avatar, their picture on their Twitter profile, are almost always spam bots, but you can look at their tweets and see if they're making real activity or not. And the thing is, a lot of bots out there will actually retweet other people's stuff, including yours. The only things that you need to care about are two things here when it comes to following and followers. There are limits on the number of people that you can follow compared to the number of people who follow you back. So you can't follow 1,000 people and only have 5 people following you back. You have to keep the number within about 200. And bots that spam you via direct message or with @replies are bots that need to be blocked and reported as spammers. Other than that, don't worry about bots because more often than not, they're useful to you. Something that certainly isn't part of our daily and weekly action plan, but something that you need to be thinking about on an ongoing basis, especially as your audience starts to grow and you start to build relationships with different speakers, is disruptive agitation, the opportunity to do things like an interview with someone. So if you've found an influencer, somebody who's a big shot in your topic, or even somebody who's got a little bit of an audience in your topic anyway, see if you can set up an interview with them using a hashtag chat. You can ask them to tweet the date, the time, and the hashtag a few times, and of course you're going to do the same yourself to promote it. Reciprocity is very important here. And this is a lot easier to do as you go on because over time you'll be able to make friends with more and more of the other speakers in the conversation. Retweeting each other is something that's mutually beneficial, and when you retweet someone, it means basically that they owe you one, even if they don't feel like it right away. Once people know you, and once you aren't needing to impress each other with how much you're retweeting each other, you can both skip the old style retweets and just hit the regular retweet button once they get to know you. And that becomes important again because a lot of people are going to be following both of you. And so they really don't need to see the same tweet twice. So, aside from following 4 or 5 people that appear to be listeners in the conversation every day, and aside from following anybody whose stories you're retweeting or stories that you found interesting that might be pumping out other interesting stories, following those people to be able to find more stories, there are some other useful people on the Twitter system to follow. If your competition is on Twitter and they've got a presence there, it might be worth seeing what happens if you pick a few of their followers to follow yourself. Are there any of them that are actually talking about the topic that you're talking about, or any of them that are interested in that topic? You'll find out by following them and seeing who follows you back. Doing keyword searches in profiles and also in the vast stream of tweets can help you find people that are interested in or talking about a topic, and if you've already got a history of talking and sharing useful stories about a topic, a lot of them will follow you back as well. Watch for relevant hashtags, things like events and topics for candidates that you might want to use for hashtags yourself, and also candidates that you might want to use to help you find people. So, for example, if you're in SEO, anybody that's using #SEO chat in their tweets is definitely interested in SEO, and they're interested in having conversations about it. So those are great people to follow. Some people will follow you back, some people won't. That's the breaks. Following back helps you both if they do it, but it's no skin off your nose if they don't. We're not spamming here. After all, it's just about us talking to the people that are willing to listen to us. Now, let's talk for a moment here, and we're going to get into this in the practice module, but some people out there are already going to understand what I mean. So I'm going to talk about bookmarklets and plugins here. If this makes no sense to you, let it go. Most RSS reader apps that are out there, both on desktop systems and on things like the iPad, can also tweet. If you use an iPad, I highly recommend taking a look at Mr. Reader. Why? Because Mr. Reader has not just a Twitter button to let you tweet, it also has a buffer button that lets you put things into buffer. So if you're reading RSS feeds, finding interesting stories, you can just hit the buffer button, say what you're going to say, and bam, it'll go into your buffer. And you can spend an hour once a week reading RSS feeds and find all of the stories that you're going to want to share in one shot. That won't cover you for any retweets that you want to do, but later on, as you build your audience, you're not going to be spending a whole lot of time retweeting anyway. Twitter and Buffer both offer bookmarklets, which are little tools that you can just drag and drop to your browser toolbar and use them to do things like tweet out a link to the page that you're on. Now, the one for Twitter is pretty cool. You let you tweet stuff now, but the one for Buffer, if you use Buffer, is even cooler because it'll let you choose to either tweet the link out right now or put it into your buffer where it'll get tweeted out later in the natural order of things that it sends things out. Brand new things that were just published today are usually worth tweeting out right now, and things that are a little bit older, just something cool that you found, you can just stick into your buffer. If you're really dying to get into this stuff and make it your life, you might want to check out the social browser. It's called Rockmelt, and there's versions for Windows and Mac and probably for Linux too. But also, as you start to get into Twitter, if you're going to be working with it a lot yourself, it's worth playing with some different Twitter clients and apps on the tablets and phones and things like that that are out there. On the desktop, you really don't do any better than just using the Twitter app itself most of the time. But tools like TweetDeck, if you're managing multiple profiles, can come in really handy. So let's wrap this all up to what you need to do. You're going to be sending out 5 or 6 story tweets a day. Some will be retweets in the old style, and others will be just direct links to the story that you're sharing. Follow the people that you retweet, and go for maximum engagement. So mention authors by their Twitter handle when you can find them. Follow 4 or 5 people a day in addition to the ones that you're following because you're sharing their stories. You're looking for listeners who follow back, and listeners who will follow you back are even better. Speakers who are interesting and will follow people back. And you can tell whether people are following anyone back by looking at their profile. How many people are they following, and how many followers do they have? If those numbers are way, way apart, like there's 1,000 people following and they're only following 3 people, then they probably don't follow back. If they're following 100 people and 100 people are following them, or if they're following 50 people and there are 150 people following them, then they probably follow back at least fairly often. And finally, look for people using particular hashtags because that is gold to you. By the way, just to repeat, if you find a hashtag that people are using a lot on your topic, you can also use that hashtag on your tweets, which will help more people find you and more people follow you naturally. Other than that, you just keep doing it. Track your progress in gaining followers, but don't obsess about it. Even just tweeting, just sharing stories will gain you followers. Like I said, there are limits to following and follow backs. So if you hit a wall in you're following too many people versus the number that are following you, you can just slow down, clean that up a little bit, and keep talking and sharing. At some point, you will hit that critical mass. So even then, just keep on talking and sharing, or at the very least, keep on sharing the content that people followed you to get. Well, you've made it through week 2 of Link Liberation, and we're almost set to start with week 3, so that'll be coming shortly. In week 3, we'll begin to build your Link Liberation implementation guide. So we'll have some worksheets and planning guides and stuff like that for you to use. We'll also have some examples and case studies in different markets and big video. It's a whole bunch of markets that we looked at all at once and suggestions for topics and things like that. And best of all, I will be building a brand new business using Link Liberation to build my audience, and you can watch over my shoulders step by step as I get that business up and running.